Hey, it's Kyle here, and this is a continuation of my series in 2018 where I talk about some of my favorite books and some of my favorite literary genres. So, this video I'll be talking about my 5 favorite books in alternate history. Alternate history is one of my favorite genres, if not my favorite genre. It's right there with sci-fi. Absolutely love alternate history. Not surprisingly, I'm a big history nerd, so I love nonfiction. But one reason I've always loved history is the what if. It's so easy if you just change some small aspect of history, how drastically the events would turn out differently. Which is why I love alternate history so much, because it does take those what ifs and turns into great stories. To me, the best alternate history, though, are books that work on the character and storyline. So even if you take out the interesting alternate history aspect, the story is still interesting, the characters are still interesting. Because if it's just an interesting concept, but the characters are boring and the plot's boring, it's not going to be a good book. So with that out of the way, I'll delve into my 5 favorite alternate history books of all time. First up, number 5 is Opening Atlantis by Harry Turtledove. And I should say a lot of these books in this top 5 are the first books in the series. So I decided just to, if there was, in this case, instead of picking my favorite book in the series, I just decided to always pick the first book in the series and just kind of more say the series is my favorite. So the Atlantis series by Turtledove is very, very interesting. It basically has the concept of what is our eastern United States basically at some point in ancient history had broke off from the mainland and kind of formed an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So when the age of exploration started, the first explorers actually discovered this island in the middle of the Atlantic instead of discovering North America first. And this becomes known as Atlantis, not surprisingly. So it takes a lot of aspects of early American colonial history and transplants it to this exotic island of Atlantis. So it's kind of a unique take on alternate history. Usually alternate history usually delves more in changing like historical events, not necessarily changing the landmass of Earth, but this case does that, and it kind of shows how that would have impacted the course of history in the New World and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed the Atlantis series, and Opening Atlantis was a great start to it. Loved it. Harry Turtledove is one of my favorite authors of all time. Definitely my favorite alternate history author of all time. But of any genre, I love Turtledove. So, Opening Atlantis, number 5. Number 4, Fatherland by Robert Harris. This is a little bit different than your typical alternate history book because it's really more of a mystery novel that just happens to be set in an alternate history setting. I think typically if you are really into like true crime books or mystery books, you'll love Fatherland, even if you're typically not really that interested in history. Because I think really the primary genre of this book is more the mystery, crime-solving genre and not necessarily the alternate history genre. But it does have an interesting alternate history concept behind it, which is basically Germany won World War II, and it's the decades after the end of the war, and it's talking about how life in Europe is like, and basically this I want to say like this crime mystery begins to threaten to reveal certain secrets about Germany that they wish to keep secret, and it comes through this investigation by an investigator in Berlin begins to kind of discover some secrets, and the story is going from there. I don't really want to get into a lot of the plot because it'll begin spoiling some stuff, but like I said, I love this book because it's a great combination of alternate history and kind of a crime novel. So Fatherland by Robert Harris is really, really interesting. Number 3, another book by Harry Turtledove, and again the first book in another series. This book is How Few Remain. The last book I talked about, Fatherland, delves into one of the most common concepts of alternate history. how history would have been different in Germany in World War II. Probably the other most common story that's delved into an alternate history is how history would have been different if the Confederacy had won the Civil War. And this is where How Few Remain starts. And basically, this book is actually not set during the Civil War, though. It's set 20 years later in the early 1880s, and basically is looking at how events unfold when basically the Confederacy has been independent for about 15, 20 years or so. Talks about the relationships with the United States and how they're on the verge of a second war and what's going on with that. I love this series. The characters in these are amazing. Examining how differently the history of America would have been if you'd had two countries, the United States and the Confederacy. This series goes all the way up through World War I and then World War II is where it concludes, and really looks at like how everything would have been different if there had been two countries in America instead of just one. And again, the reason I love Turtledove so much is his characters are absolutely fascinating. You become so invested in these characters that you read book after book after book after book. And Turtledove series tend to be very long, so you get a lot of time with these characters. So this is a great start to his series, How Few Remain. If you're really interested in reading an awesome alternate history series, I would recommend you check out How Few Remain and then read all the other books in this follow-up series. Excuse me. Number 2, The Plot Against America by Philip Roth. This is a standalone novel, which is kind of unique. Only 2 of the books in my top 5 are standalone novels. The Plot Against America is taking an aspect of American history that a lot of Americans really don't know, that in the lead up to World War II, there was very much a strong movement to keep America out of the war. Because World War II becomes such a major aspect of American history, and there's so much pride in America on our role in World War II in helping to defeat Germany and Japan, and what that meant to America on the world stage in the decades afterwards, that it's often forgot that a huge segment of the American population was really dedicating itself to keeping America out of World War II before the attack on Pearl Harbor. And this book kind of delves into that. Another aspect of American history that relates to that people don't realize is Charles Lindbergh, one of the greatest American heroes ever, a huge aviation icon, was one of the leaders of this movement to keep America out of World War II. And this book explores the concept if Lindbergh had got more heavily involved in politics, and perhaps he'd been elected president, how that would have impacted the U.S.'s interaction with the rest of the world during World War II, when we got into conflict, when we had stayed out. And basically all the players in America and Europe who would have been interested in how events unfolded in America, and perhaps, as the title suggests, there's a plot afoot to lead America down a certain path in their decision if they should enter the war or they shouldn't. The Plot Against America by Philip Roth is a fascinating novel. Absolutely loved it. Highly recommend it. Number 1, not surprisingly, since I've already had 2 books of his in my top 5, is Worldwar in the Balance. Is the first book in the series by Harry Turtledove. So this series is actually delved into basically 2 series: the Worldwar series and the colonization series. But the concept behind this series is awesome because it's basically the combination of alternate history and sci-fi. And basically the concept is what would have happened during the middle of World War II if, while Nazi Germany, Japan, Italy was fighting against the U.S., England, Russia, all that stuff, I should say Soviet Union, if during the course of this brutal fighting, humanity is faced by alien invasion who's trying to conquer Earth. So suddenly all these countries who absolutely hate each other and are fighting to the death basically are now faced with there's a greater enemy. You know, now all of humanity is at stake. What happens? It is mind-blowingly interesting. So I think it's one of these books, like I said, if you love sci-fi, but you're typically not in alternate history, you'll love this series because it's an amazing sci-fi series. If you love alternate history, but you're not typically in sci-fi, you'll love this series because it's a fascinating alternate history series. So it's a rare combination of those two genres, because I really haven't read a whole lot of other alternate history that really successfully incorporates sci-fi elements as well as this series. Absolutely love it. So like I said, the beginning of the series is Worldwar in the balance. Cannot recommend this book anymore. Like I said, if you love alternate history, you owe yourself to read this book. If you love sci-fi, you owe it to yourself to read this book. I really hope you'll check it out. So those are my favorite alternate history books of all time. If you've read any great alternate history, let me know in the comment section what it was, and I'll definitely check it out. I'm always looking for some new alternate history to read. As always, be sure to like the video, leave comments, and please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the video, and happy reading.